was calling David, and I put it down. Are you okay with that?
Yep.
All right. Or Nikki's got the time?
Do you want
You want Nikki's phone
to
to
use my
time?
phone? Go ahead.
You're good. All right.
Alright. Is the judge ready? Is the timer ready?
Yes.
Picture this. Your grandmother was diagnosed with a terminal illness, with supposedly 6 months left to live. She decides to take advantage of medical aid and dying. Later reports come back from the autopsy. They tell you that she was misdiagnosed, that she actually had a lot longer left to live. Tragically, this situation is not unheard of. Medical aid and dying has caused many horrible situations, and that is why my partners, Ada Powers, Isabel Horowitz, and I, Jason Allison, are for the resolution the U.S. federal government should ban medical aid and dying. Observation 1. Definitions. Ban. To prohibit, especially by legal means. U.S. federal government. The federal government of the U.S. is the central reigning governmental body of the United States, established by the U.S. Constitution. Medical aid and dying. Medical aid and dying is the practice of a physician providing a competent, terminally ill patient at the patient's request with a prescription for a lethal dose of medication that the patient intends to use to end his or her own life. Physician aid in dying is a synonym for medical aid in dying. Observation 2. Harms. Harm A. Patients might recover. They often do. Quote, what if the disease prognosis is uncertain? Cancer is notorious for defying accurate prognosis. Errors in diagnosis and prognosis can and do occur. Ironically, the medical profession shuns capital punishment because an innocent person might be executed, whereas statutes that legalize medical aid and dying tolerate the real risk of mistaken diagnosis or prognosis, such that a person who does not have a terminal disease might choose medical aid and dying by mistake. The cause of such mistake is a human life. End quote. A horrifying example of this is a man named Pietro D'Amico. Quote, it was only after the family of Pietro D'Amico, age 62, insisted on an autopsy that he was found to not have a terminal illness at all, despite being given such a diagnosis by both Italian and Swiss doctors prior to undergoing assisted suicide in Switzerland. End quote. Patients can and do recover. This is not a rare event. When medical aid and dying is not prevented, the cause of misdiagnosis can easily become a life. Harm B. Doctors whose job is to heal people will be asked to kill people instead. This has been shown to cause psychological problems for the doctors. Quote, the shift away from the fundamental values of medicine to heal and promote human wholeness can have significant effects on many participating physicians. Doctors describe being profoundly adversely affected by being shocked by the suddenness of the death, being caught up in the patient's drive for assisted suicide, having a sense of powerlessness, and feeling isolated. There is evidence of pressure on and intimidation of doctors by some patients to assist in suicide. The effect of countertransference in the doctor-patient relationship may influence physician involvement in physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia. End quote. Doctors who assist in or are pressured to assist in, as they often are, experience negative psychological effects. This can jeopardize the health of patients. Harm C. Medical aid in dying poses serious risks to society and could be used to justify harmful viewpoints, such as the view that people who are sick or disabled are a burden on society and therefore disposable. Quote, this public policy reinforces a widespread better dead than disabled bias, as only people with disabilities qualify without questions. End quote. This attitude, among others, will cause serious problems, the cost of which can easily be a life. Quote, seeing suicide as a solution for some illnesses can only undermine the willingness of doctors and society to learn how to show real compassion and address patients' pain and other problems, end quote. As the end of that quote points out, pain can be managed through palliative care. My partner will present more evidence on the subject in the 2AC. By jeopardizing some of the most important and underlying moral values of our society, medical aid in dying puts disabled people at risk. These laws encourage and often attempt to enforce the attitude that it is better to be dead than disabled. By limiting and erasing other options for pain management, such as palliative care, medical aid in dying laws threaten to, among other things, push disabled people to die. They do this by creating a moral attitude which goes against that which has been held by and worked for society for thousands of years. Observation 3. Plan. Mandate. The U.S. Supreme Court will decide a case that will ban doctors from giving their patients lethal drugs intended to end the patient's life. Doctors who practice medical aid in dying will have their licenses revoked. Patients will have access to palliative care. Enforcement. The executive branch will enforce the law. The doctors will be obligated to follow law since their license is in jeopardy. Funding. There is very little funding required, if any at all, as revoking the license of a doctor does not cost money. Observation 4. Advantages. Advantage A. Terminally ill patients will sometimes recover. This law will save many lives. Quote, of all hospice patients, 11% were live discharges. 13% survived the 6-month period, end quote. An example of this is a woman named Jennifer Monaghan, who was misdiagnosed. She discovered this, and thankfully, her medical aid in dying hadn't been performed yet. Quote, after receiving treatment and ripping up her medical aid in dying application, her pain began to disappear. Now she was enjoying being a first-time grandmother. Subquote. And it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. It's so nice to be able to spend time with them, she said. Now I just feel so blessed. I feel super blessed that I got this opportunity, and to this day, I won't waste a minute of it, end quote. Advantage B. The medical profession will be recognized as one of healing. Doctors will not be asked to kill. Quote, nothing, absolutely nothing, requires that physicians be the instruments of suicide aid. The physician's task is to tell the patient what's wrong, and to the best of the doctor's ability, what is going to happen. The physician's job is to heal the sick, to stave off death, and to say, as best as he or she can, what the future will be like for each particular patient. The physician gets to be the helpless person's medical guide because he or she is trusted to hold the patient's good uppermost, and the patient's good does not include death, end quote. Advantage C. Instead of ill or disabled people being offered the option to die, they will be offered the option to manage their symptoms, something which is possible without lethal medication. Quote, palliative care is specialized medical care for people living with a serious illness. This type of care is focused on providing relief from the symptoms and stress of the illness. The goal is to improve quality of life for both the patient and the family, end quote. This even offers the patient the option of unconsciousness, like death, except not final or forced. Sometimes that means a light unconsciousness, in which the patient may still be somewhat aware of the presence of others. On other occasions, it might mean a deep unconsciousness, not unlike a coma. In some situations, the palliative sedation is limited. In others, it continues until death, end quote. There are options available, options which do not artificially end a life. Without medical aid in dying, people will be encouraged to pursue options which do not involve death. In conclusion, medical aid in dying stunts a patient's life. It magnifies the ramifications of a physician's many innocent mistakes, transforming them into deadly blunders. These mistakes are too common, and the legal safeguards to protect against them are practically non-existent. Medical aid in dying is a dangerous law which will do more harm than good. Therefore, my partners Ada Powers, Isabel Horowitz, and I, Jason Allison, urge the judges to vote for the resolution. Thank you. I am now ready for cross-examination.
7 seconds to spare.
Wow.
We're not supposed to clap, right?
No.
Is this part of what I'm timing?
Yes.
Are you using prep time before the cross, guys?
Are we? Yes.
Okay, just time to prep time.
Technically, they should be.
If they can have correct time.
Right. But they're still learning,
Come on.
so. Good that you-
So we need to do like, I'm not ready. We have to just boom, kind of.
Only if you don't see them get up and they have a mask, you like, do not tell them.
Yeah.
I think they get better because like us, they just know.
Mm.
Like they're teaching me, they're just doing what they're supposed to do.
Do I announce how much time in a week at any point?
Might not be a Thursday. Just keep respect for coming in. Is that clock?
That's 2 minutes.
We're gonna need another minute.
Three minutes.
Okay, Andrew.
Is the judge ready? Timer? Can you please tell us the source for your second quote?
That is the Australian Care Alliance.
Can you please tell me the source for your sixth quote?
That is a medical Omnicare, a medical certified hospice provider with the mission of meet the physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of the terminally ill, as well as their loved ones, while providing a quality of life throughout their life-limiting illness.
And who said that?
The Omnicare's website.
So whoever wrote it? And
Yes.
you don't know who wrote it?
No.
No. Can you give me the source for the seventh quote?
Wait, I lost it.
Which is the seventh quote? If you're not sure.
1, 2, 3. Seven, that's this one. That is, that was said by Jennifer Monaghan.
And do you have the credentials for her?
She is a close call of medical aid and dying. Almost did it, but didn't.
We have no further questions.
Are you ready to go, or do you need more prep time?
Just like give me like 30 more seconds, like activate.
Yeah.
Are the judges ready? Is the timer ready?
Yes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and audience. My name is Nicole Menendez. My partner is Josiah Godek and Andrew Sargent. Stand resolved. The U.S. federal government should not ban medical aid and dying. Observation 1. Definitions. The negative team accepts the affirmative team's definitions. Observation 2. Harms. People are informed beforehand and can choose not to. Only, quote, only after After a thorough explanation of risk and benefits, can the patient have the agency to make a decision about treatments or participation in medical research? This logic, it is argued, naturally extends to aid. Patients accustomed to making their own healthcare decisions throughout life should be permitted to control the circumstances of their death. Even if, end quote, even if they would not, wait, excuse me. Even if they would have lived, they still made a choice to end it peacefully. Harm 2. Doctors don't feel obligated to not end suffering. Quote, in Canada, only a few medical schools use the Hippocratic Oath because it is inconsistent with its premises. The oath makes the physician promise to relieve pain and treatment cancer. Patients are given chemotherapy, a form of radioactive medicine that has hair loss, vomiting, and other extremity unpleasant side effects. Thus, chemotherapy can be considered deadly medicine because its effects on the human body, and this inconsistency is the reason why the Hippocratic Oath cannot be used to deny the right to assisted suicide. Harm 3. There are safeguards in place to prevent abuse. Aid in dying is, quote, aid in dying is lauded by advocates for being a safe medical practice. That is, doctors can ensure death in a way that suicide by other means cannot. Aid in dying thus becomes one option among many possibilities for care of the dying. Although individual state laws vary, most propose a number of safeguards to prevent abuses and to provide structure for an act that some people will do anyway, albeit more hazardly or even dangerously, end quote. No one can be forced to use the drug. Observation 3. Plan. U.S. Supreme Court will legalize medical aid in dying in all states. It will be available to everyone who qualifies. Observation 4. Disadvantages. Disadvantage 1. If you wait, the person could suffer, then die. It does reduce the grief of loved ones because families and loved ones are prepared for the death. Their loved one will, while an unexpected death could come as a surprise, and they could feel like they could have done more. End quote. Disadvantage 2. Disadvantage 2. Doctors are relieving pain and suffering as they took an oath to relieve pain and suffering and are not killing, but are doing their job by relieving pain and suffering. And my partners and I stand resolved that U.S. federal government should not ban medical aid in dying. Thank you. I am now ready for cross-examination.
Did they have more time?
Yes, they had 4.5 minutes.
Did you need more time? No, okay. Are you taking time for preparing for the cross?
Or just take a minute. Yeah, just about a minute.
Okay. One minute.
Alright, are the judges ready?
Yes.
Is the timer ready?
Hold on. Go.
Can you repeat your disadvantage?
The first one or the second one?
The
Can you repeat both of them?
If you wait, the person could suffer then die. It does, or quote, it does reduce the grief of loved ones because families and loved ones are prepared for the death of their loved one, while an unexpected death could come as a surprise, and they could feel like they could have done more.
Alright, thank you. That's it. Can you tell me how relevant the Hippocratic Oath is in your second?
My harm.
Yes.
The Hippocratic Oath is relevant because doctors don't feel an obligation to help end suffering.
Do you agree that the Hippocratic Oath is very old?
Yes.
Alright,
It is
and did you address our harm C in our 1AC?
Yes, I think so.
Remind them what your harm C
Yeah,
was.
that would be helpful. Thank you.
Our harm C is medical aid in dying could be used to justify a culture where a duty to die is placed on terminally ill people.
Could you repeat that?
Your teammates may help hand you things too.
Medical aid in dying could be used to justify a culture where a duty to die is placed on terminally ill people.
I don't think we addressed that. No.
Alright, and did you address our better dead than disabled argument in our 1AC?
No.
No.
Oh, it was pharmacy.
Is this now prep time?
This is prep time.
So you're counting prep time now for the affirmative team, right, Laura?
Yep.
Can you request a copy of the 2AC?
Tommy?
Can we request a copy of the 2AC, or do they just read it?
You can request, they don't have a 2AC,
Yeah, they're
but
making
after
it
they go during the cross, you can request specific pieces of evidence.
Okay.
So for example, if they had you repeat something, they could have actually asked you for that piece of evidence.
Yep.
And just for our judge and our spectators, this is our first full debate. These students did a debate last semester that was just the first part of the debate. So we're all still learning the debate process. And in our challenge program, we have 3 more years where they continue to learn more about debate. But this is their first year to start learning.
2 more years, actually.
Oh, they don't do it in 4? No.
But then we used to.
And you got their prep time there?
Mhm.
Okay.
Open?
Do you wanna tell each team how much prep time they have left?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
I can calculate that.
Is the judge ready?
Yes.
Is the timer ready?
Hold on. Okay.
Then let's begin. Quote, Bradshaw, he said gently, looking down at the old man lying under the covers. Bradshaw Perkins Jr. blinked and stared vacantly at the doctor. You don't know who I am yet because you're still waking up, Shavelson said. Do you remember that I'm the doctor who is here to help you die? This was the 90th assisted death which Dr. Shavelson performed. The man who died was not killed instantly. There is no magic death pill, Shavelson said. Even some of the frailest people, given toxic amounts of the disgusting mixture which is necessary for medical aid in dying, clung to life for hours and hours, unquote. This is not a magically painless way to die. It is not a perfect one-size-fits-all solution. In this speech, I will counter the arguments made by the negative team and the 1NC. Observation 1, definitions. The affirmative team is pleased that the negative team has accepted our definitions. Observation 2, harms. Harm A. Our harm A was that the patients might recover or be misdiagnosed. You addressed that harm A by saying that the patients had a choice. However, if the patient's misdiagnosed, they might choose wrongly if they don't have the full effect, if they don't have the full knowledge of it.
they might choose wrongly. Also, you mentioned that the death was peaceful. And quote, some assisted deaths were not completed, or they were agonizing, or they took hours. Sometimes panicked bystanders resorted to pillows, knives, or guns. Medical aid in dying deaths are not always painless, as we said in our opening. There is no magic death pill. You also mentioned the Hippocratic Oath, which is kind of irrelevant. You mentioned that it wasn't in action, and therefore doctors wouldn't be pressured. However, in our 1AC, we never said that doctors were being pressured by government and by laws. We said they were being pressured by patients, and it was the patients who were pressuring them. So the Hippocratic Oath is really not useful. Harm B, you said that the doctors would be asked to kill. Harm C, you didn't address at all that medical aid in dying could be used to justify a culture where death was placed on terminally ill people. And a quote for that is, when it comes to assisted suicide, we see in states like Oregon, where assisted suicide has been legal for 2 decades, the percentage of Oregon deaths attributed to the patient's reluctance to be a burden to their families rose from 13% to 40% in 2014. This reveals the right to die option for vulnerable populations is quickly becoming more like a duty to die. And so this proves that that is an issue, and you did not address it at all. Advantage A, you said that if you wait, a person could suffer, and then you didn't give evidence that people were suffering. Instead, you gave evidence that families were having trauma from their relatives dying natural deaths. And that is not the only side to that issue. There's evidence on the other side of that. Quote, the relatives were more likely to feel regret about how they had died, to feel the relatives' wishes had not been taken into account. So as you can see, that is not the only side of this issue, and there are psychological effects for relatives no matter what we do, sadly. And in conclusion, medical aid in dying is not a perfect solution to horrible pain. It is riddled with risks, from the agonizing methods of death to the misdiagnoses. The horrible risks and effects of this practice can be erased by banning this law. That is why the U.S. federal government should ban medical aid in dying. Thank you. I'm now ready for cross-examination.
And how much time did they have left?
4.5 minutes.
We're gonna take some prep time, please.
Okay.
Okay, so, is the judge ready? Timer ready?
Yep.
Alright, let's begin. So one thing that I heard you say was that it causes psychological damage to families, correct?
Yes.
But if someone dies, it's always gonna cause damage, correct?
Yes, which is what we were saying.
Yes,
There's
but,
different evidence to counter.
yes,
Burkhardt saying that it gave more damage the other way.
yes, but with medical aid in dying, that would most likely reduce the damage because they know their loved one, it chose their own way out, correct?
We have evidence against that, one of which I presented, and one of which I can't present if you would like me to.
No, thank you. What were your sources for your third home?
Third harm? Alright. The one about families?
Yes.
That was Katie Engelhardt in an article about Dr. Sheldonson, who was a doctor who was performing assisted deaths experiences with medical aid and dying. She interviewed him and wrote an article about his experiences.
Okay,
Oh,
thank you.
no, sorry, that was the wrong one. Sorry. Sorry, that was the British Medical Journal.
Thank you. And then, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to read, I think you may have given us a slightly older copy of the 1AC, because for us here, harm C was, and I'm just reading this here, medical aid in dying that poses serious risk to society and can be used to justify harmful viewpoints, such as the view that people who are sick or disabled are a burden on society and therefore disposable. Is that the same?
That is the same.
Is that the same thing?
I believe so.
Because
I could get them.
If
do you
it
want
is,
to
that's
say, Jeff?
not quite what you were saying, your harm was.
I think it was. It's the same thing, just rephrased and specified. Harm C, yes, same thing.
But it's worded slightly different.
Yes, because we're not going to say it every speech.
No further questions?
Before you do the second negative construct,
Yes,
the last two constructive speeches, you each had 4.5 minutes left.
yes.
So go ahead and keep an eye on the timer. She's signaling you how many minutes. And be conscious that you don't need to rush. I feel like you guys both felt like you needed to rush and you didn't need to rush. You had lots of time.
We're gonna take a little bit of prep